So, at the studio with Kitchen Theory today, we have Duncan Boak, the CEO and founder of Fifth Sense, a charity for people affected by smell and taste disorders. Duncan, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thanks, Joseph. Great to see you again.
Well, we had met, we re-met a few weeks ago at an event that was being hosted. Well, you can tell me, who was it being hosted by? I only know Mariana, to be honest with you.
It was it was being hosted by Professor Mariana Obrist at University College London, and it was the showcase event for the smell care project, which Fifth Sense has been a partner on, and this is a feasibility study trialing the use of a digital odor emitting device, with the idea that this be used for people to be able to sort of train their sense of smell at home. And the study was trialing this device in the homes of people to see how they would sort of respond to, and use the device at home.
Yeah, how did you get in touch with Mariana, or how did this project come about? How did this come to fruition?
Mariana was introduced to us at the charity maybe about five or 6 years ago, by a contact, because of her interest in the sense of smell, particularly in terms of the digital aspects of that. And through her working with us, with her getting an understanding of the issues faced by people with smell and taste disorders, that's how the project came to fruition.
Because it's fascinating for me. I've known Mariana for years, but in a completely separate way to how I'd met you.
Okay.
And it's just such a small world that when I ended up there and Mariana had invited me along, and then I met you, and we hadn't met since pre-COVID. And it's quite interesting because pre-COVID, there's a huge difference between, I guess, people's understanding of your work and the kind of not renewed, but the kind of growing, swelling interest that people have in this area. So before we get into that, just give people an idea about what does Fifth Sense do and why is it so important?
Okay, thanks. So I started the charity based on my own personal experience of losing my sense of smell as a result of a head injury. Now that happened back in 2005 when I was 22 years old, and had this nasty accident. Went to see my doctor because I realised I couldn't smell anything, and their reaction was, "Okay, heard of this happen before, but we know very little about it. Might come back. If it doesn't, you just have to live with it." And so I got that was the extent of the information support I got from doctors at the time. Spent the next six years thinking I was one of the only people on the planet with this, and then
and how did it affect your life?
In all sorts of ways. I think the biggest impact was sort of psychological, in terms of mood and just quality of life experience. I just felt that I'm no longer connected with the world and people, other people in the same way anymore. And, there was the biggest, most obvious impact was loss of appreciation of flavour of food. To me, I couldn't really taste things anymore. But it was much deeper than that. But it's fair to say that I didn't really kind of fully understand the consequences of it until I actually started to learn about the sense of smell itself and how important it is. And that was through reading a book by this American girl about her experience of smell loss. And reading this was a real sort of eureka moment, and sort of gave me some of the answers and information that I'd just not had up until that point. I was introduced to a consultant here, nose and throat surgeon, called Carl Philpott, as a result of reading that book. He and I started talking. He'd set up the UK's first NHS smell and taste clinic the previous year.
What year was this, out of interest?
It was in 2011 that I read the book, and
wow,
Carl and I
okay.
were introduced. He'd been looking to get a patient support group set up for people with anosmia. And by this point, I realised that there were significant numbers of people. I certainly wasn't one in a
And
million.
just to define anosmia for people who aren't familiar with the term.
So anosmia is the term for the inability to smell.
Okay.
So through the conversations Carl and I had, and the realization that there was nothing out there to support people, and actually how beneficial it would have been if I'd had access
Sure.
to support and information, I had the idea to start the charity, and Fifth Sense was born. It was a passion project. to begin with. And I did it in my spare time for 10 years as a trustee of the charity. And then about 2.5 years ago, I was appointed as our first chief executive, and it's been my full-time job since then. And that sort of come following the COVID pandemic. And what I've been working really hard to do, with our team since then is build on the increased awareness that COVID has generated. And the way I would describe it is that, I've said to a few people, before COVID, we were banging a drum about smell and taste disorders, the impact they have on people, how prevalent they are, and not many people were listening. And one of the challenges was that people didn't even know it was a thing. A lot of people, including myself, don't think it's something that you can lose or have a problem with until it happens to them.
Mm.
And then now, of course, okay, following this global pandemic in which, significant numbers of people globally have lost a sense of smell or have distorted
Or
smells or
know
tastes.
people who have.
Ex- ex-
I mean, that's the thing
exactly.
is, so what was interesting to me is that even people who haven't lost their sense of smell now have an interest in this because they know someone or have lived with someone or have friends or relatives that have lost their sense of smell and have talked to them about that experience. So now there's just a greater general awareness, I feel, about kind of anosmia and the impact that that can have on your day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's either happened to somebody themselves or they know somebody else. And what we're seeing is a real kind of appetite for the work that we're doing, a real interest in that. So one aspect of our work is we're delivering education and training to professionals, and we've delivered sessions to over 40 NHS post-COVID services now, because
Wow.
they were, this is a topic, a health issue that just has not been covered in
Yeah, and I'm guessing they had nothing to really contribute or to kind of, give people a sense of reassurance or an idea on where to go for more information or to kind of better understand what it is as a issue that they're facing and what they could potentially do to help. And interestingly enough, a lot of people that I've met through that period, I've referred to Fifth Sense and said, look, they're probably a good place to start with in terms of finding information, trying to get a little bit more of an understanding, but at least there's a way for people to feel like they're, empowered or taking charge of the situation, because it can be very, very frustrating when you feel fine. It's just your sense of smell doesn't seem to want to work, and I've heard everything from loss of appetite, obviously not enjoying food and social gatherings around that involve food or drink, and if you think of everything from birthday parties to Eids or festivals and whatever it may be, food is such a central part of all those celebrations that people actually feel like they're greatly missing out.
Well, that's it. Eating and drinking forms the backdrop to most of our social experiences, doesn't it? And that happens irrespective of sort of culture and country. That's humans the world over. And that issue alone, you take away the pleasure from eating. And in fact, for some people, for example, people experiencing parosmia, so distorted sense of smell, where that makes the flavors of certain foods and drinks taste really unpleasant and vile, you know, noxious even. And so that actually creates an aversion for people to eating out because they're going to be assailed by these smells and flavors that are actually repulsive. So
Is that the same way in that, when you say like pregnant women, you hear kind of quite often will say things like coffee that they used to love, all of a sudden they find, disgusting, the smell of it, they can't stand certain. Is that along those lines kind of?
Similar, yeah, similar
Okay.
reaction. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's, if you whether it's the loss of or changes to the way things smell and taste, it can take what should be a really pleasurable experience
Mm.
and turn that into something that's actually painful or abhorrent for people. And so that affects people's social lives and enjoyment of life. And that's just one aspect of it all.
So why has there in the past been so little focus on what is such a vital sense? Because even if you think about from a innate like how we've just grown as humans, our sense of smell, it warns us of danger. We use it for mating. It's such an important sense, other than just the pleasure that we take from food, let's say. It's not just a hedonistic sense, it's actually quite a important survival type of sense to have. Tells us about spoiled foods and stuff like that. There's, our sense of smell is so important. Why has it been so neglected so far?
I think the way that Western society and culture has evolved over centuries, we've become more focused on our sight and hearing
Mm.
for understanding, analysing, and engaging with the world. And we've forgotten or almost sort of pushed smell to one side. And I think partly I think there's an argument that that's partly because it was seen as this sort of has been seen as this sort of primal, almost kind of more animalistic sense. And, we've got these more powerful tools that we can use to understand the world. But I think what we've lost is or maybe even never really had, is this recognition that in terms of how we really feel the world, okay, how we engage with it and appreciate it emotionally, the sense of smell is absolutely vital to that.
Well, sure. I mean, our when it comes to our olfactory system, your sense of smell is one of the only senses, I believe, that's directly connected to the amygdala, being the emotional kind of center of your brain. And it is incredible. We all experience it. There's certain perfume or cologne that you can smell that transports you to a time or reminds you of a person. There are certain food aromas that, conjure nostalgia, that conjure, appetite. It's incredible how powerful our sense of smell is in terms of transporting us in some way.
Yeah, it's like the olfactory system goes straight, it's hardwired straight into the parts of the brain that are responsible for how we, like I say, really feel the world. Our memories, our emotions, and our moods, and a link to our behaviors as well.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this is I remember we were talking about Professor Barry Smith, who had been on the show quite a few years during the pandemic, actually. I'd met him about 12 years ago, and I remember running this by him, and he seemed to verify this because I remember reading it somewhere, but I can't really remember the reference of where. But essentially, there was research that had been conducted where they asked people if they had to lose one of their senses, which one would it be? And that the majority went for their sense of smell. That seemed to be the number one sense that, gun to your head, you've got to lose one of your senses. Which would it be? Smell is the first to go. Then in completely separate research, the data or the outcomes of that research suggested that those who suffer from anosmia and a loss of sense of smell, in the long run, suffer from greater levels of depression than those who lose their sense of vision. And that may seem wild to people, that idea that how could I miss my sense of smell more than my sense of vision? And I guess my kind of, rationale for that in some way would be, well, with sense of vision, I guess, you are missing out on the visual arts and movies and sunsets and plenty of things. And it obviously limits maybe your mobility. And there are certain elements that obviously impact one's life. But the interesting thing is that you learn to adapt more to that. Whereas with a loss of sense of smell, you never really quite adapt, is what I've heard at least. And in the long run, that loss of appetite, that social kind of withdrawal, and all of the other kind of, as you mentioned, kind of social aspects that go with losing your sense of smell, that in the long run actually results in people feeling more isolated and more depressed.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with all of that. If you think about how you can, people are able to sort of adapt functionally to a visual impairment, but how do you adapt emotionally in the
Mm.
same way when you've been, completely deprived of things that trigger really pleasurable memories? When you can't smell your partner, your
Well, this
children,
is it. Yeah,
and
it's
that,
those intimate
yeah,
moments, isn't it?
that
That where you're not even aware of it, but your sense of smell is doing so much to make that moment real and to make it intimate. It's incredible.
That absolutely. And I will be completely honest, okay, and that the by far the biggest and sort of lasting impact of this for me has been the effect it's had on my romantic and relationships. So that loss of that there's just not that sort of same level of connection. And
We
it's
take it so much for
yeah,
granted.
yeah, we do, and this is the thing, and this is where, right, this is what really interesting about the work we do with the charity, that I think we actually have so much power in the experiences and stories of the many people like me. We know better than anyone just how important sort of smell is to our enjoyment of life, our connection, our emotional and mental well-being. And it's through our stories that we can get others to understand. And I think that's been one of the things about COVID, has it's given people, a lot of people, a very short insight into that experience. But the conversations I have with people who lost the sense of smell because of COVID, who said to me, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I remember my next door neighbour at the time. I was living in this flat in Hackney, and it was the day after we'd first put information on the Fifth Sense website about the link between loss of smell and COVID. And the next morning, I got a WhatsApp from her in the morning saying, "Duncan, you're not going to believe this. I've got COVID. I've lost my sense of smell." She said, "I've been on your website. I've been reading everything that's on there. It's been incredibly helpful. Any chance of a chat?" So I rang her up and I was like, we had this conversation about it, and she said, "Do you know what? I can completely understand now why you did this with the charity." And she said, "It's just been so helpful." And hers came back a couple of weeks later. But she said, "It's just been so, I just feel disconnected from everything. I can't enjoy my food. I just can't smell a thing. It's like I'm in this weird sort of bubble." Well, imagine that. But then, for a lot of people, that's potentially a long-term situation.
So I've got a story that basically I've never told anyone, so you're the first person to hear this.
Okay.
It was probably around end of 2021. One day, I couldn't perceive flavor. I could taste sweetness, I could taste saltiness, I could taste bitterness. I just couldn't get a bit of flavor out of anything. And I realized I didn't have a sense of smell. I had no symptoms of COVID. I had nothing. I was absolutely fine. Just woke up one day, it was gone.
Wow.
If I tell you how worried I was, because obviously my profession and what I do, that
Absolutely.
obviously I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell anyone. I was so afraid that I just didn't say anything. But even as I was in the kitchen tasting things, I couldn't tell. I had no idea. I really had no idea. I could tell if something was too salty or too sweet, or I could judge that kind of stuff, but I
Hmm.
couldn't, I had no idea as to whether any of the nuance of it could have been, chicken stock or a beef stock or a fish stock. It could have been anything. It was just
Right.
liquid that had a slight kind of umami saltiness to it, and that was pretty much it. A week later, everything was back and functioning as normal. And I cannot tell you the relief.
Right.
But what was interesting about it is, as someone who's so super aware of
Yes.
sense of smell, like I've been working not specifically in smell, but in the senses for about 12 years,
Yeah.
being so acutely aware of it and hearing some of the stories I've heard from people who are anosmic. There was one lady who had a cold and it just never came back. And I'd spoken to her, and this was about 18 months on, and she, for 18 months, just hadn't had a sense of smell. And you kind of think, what if I've lost my sense of smell? And again, given my profession, that was when it did come back, there was a massive kind of sigh of relief on my side. Because I would say as well, I'm probably someone who prides myself on having a pretty decent palate,
Yeah.
or, I've trained myself over years to kind of have a certain nuance because of the trade that I'm in. And to have lost that would have been devastating.
I mean, absolutely massive. And how would you have felt had you gone to see a doctor and
Well,
they?
this is it. I knew that there was no point.
But this is the thing, isn't it? But imagine you'd gone to see a doctor in that
Yeah.
situation, given your profession, given how much value and importance you place on your sense of smell, to have been given a shrug
Oh,
and told,
100%.
"Well, there's nothing we can do, but at least it's only a sense of smell. It could be worse."
Yeah, you'll have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because if you think for most other senses, I mean, the ones that we really seem to value in terms of hearing, the visual and audio, we've got aids for.
Right.
Our sense of smell, maybe given that it's a chemical sense, maybe slightly harder to develop any kind of an aid for.
I mean, that comes onto a point of this just being a chronically, under-researched and an undervalued area. And, there is so much need and opportunity here. Looking at it in another way, it's really quite exciting. And I think the work that Mariana and her team, together with ourselves has been doing with the device they've developed. And actually what's been really interesting has been actually just how well that project has gone and how so many of the people who participated in the project. So the device, this smell emitting device was placed in people's homes for a 6-month period. So the device itself is a box about this high with a little grill on the front, angled like this, and with a little sort of software interface with it and an app. It's run by an app from your phone. And so you can basically run through a smell training program. The device has a number of smell cartridges built into it. And so by using the app, you can get it to emit odors, control bursts of different odors. And the idea being that you do that with your face up against, sort of close to it, smelling those odors on a regular basis.
And are they a set sequence of aromas? Do you choose them? Have you guys selected them? How do you go about that?
The choice of odors themselves was sort of a few people involved in that, including Cole Philpott, Mariana, and some other, ourselves included. But the idea was it was a set choice of odors to begin with. The device has got carry 6 odors in total. Then every few weeks, 2 of the odors would change.
Right.
And the idea being to expose people's noses to a range of smells. And yeah, the idea was for people to use it on a regular basis for the 6 months it was in their home. And people were also asked to report, keep like a sort of a journal log, respond to questions about how they felt the sense of smell was, and how they felt it was responding. What was really interesting is that in terms of who participated, there were 2 groups of people. There was one group of people with an olfactory disorder, and then another group of people over the age of 65 who didn't necessarily have a problem with the sense of smell.
But just to clarify, I guess as we all grow older, our sense of smell is diminishing in some way. So
Yes.
I think for people who aren't aware of that, I guess 65 and above, you'd expect that their sense of smell isn't as
Optimal.
as someone in their 20s and 30s, depending on how, I mean, that doesn't mean everyone in their 20s and 30s has a great sense of smell, but I believe that everyone's sense of smell, where it's kind of constantly, or not constantly, but at some point it starts to tail off and is in decline.
Exactly. And that's a really important point. And I think that the key differentiation was that the other group of people who had some olfactory impairment that had been caused by something specific. And some of the people in that group felt that their sense of smell actually improved over the course of the project, over the 6-month period. They felt they got some benefit from the routine, regular smelling. Whether it was the actual smelling that has caused an improvement or not, we don't know. Or whether it was partly about regular kind of mindfully smelling things. They experienced a sort of a natural recovery anyway, but it helped them. It helped aid that natural recovery.
Yeah, and I think that idea that you mentioned of this mindfulness, I think, is really important, because with something along the lines of smell training, I think to some degree, how I've understood it, at least from what I've kind of ascertained over time, is that really it's about getting your brain to again build those connections back, right? In terms of being able to be exposed to, let's say, citrus kind of aroma, and retraining one's brain to try and rebuild those kind of connections in the mind that I guess over time potentially can help one with maybe generally improving their sense of smell. But do we know cases of people who have suffered from anosmia that have completely regained their sense of smell, like beyond a period of, a few weeks or months?
Yeah. And I mean, people with smell loss caused by virus, like COVID, some people will and do recover, not necessarily fully, but maybe almost fully. But for some people, it could be a few years.
Ah, okay.
of maybe gradual improvements. I remember meeting someone a couple of years ago. They'd lost the sense of smell as the result of a cold, years ago, well before COVID. No sense of smell for 7 years. They did have sort of some of the distortions at earlier points in that, and then all of a sudden it just started to come back
Wow.
and came back in a I think he said in a few months. So
That's
it's really
fascinating.
interesting. Yeah.
I've met a few people who lost their sense of smell and regained it, but it wasn't like, as I told you with myself, it was kind of like overnight, a switch that just got flicked off and then back on again. But a very good friend of mine, I think he had got COVID traveling to New York. But again, this was kind of pretty much after everything had blown over, really. And it probably, from what I recall, took him something like 6 to 8 months to feel that he could smell his coffee
Yeah.
in the morning. He could went back to maybe drinking wine again and stuff like that. The things that when he'd lost that sense of smell, or even partially lost it, that he just took no enjoyment out of whatsoever.
And the point being, looking at those two examples, and also unfortunately for people who've had the virus, a virus that's lost it, and who then don't recover, at this point in time, we just can't say on an individual basis what chances someone has of recovery because we still don't know enough about what damage is caused by the virus to the olfactory system to be able to, sort of make a prognosis on an individual basis. And that makes our work quite difficult in terms of supporting people because it's sort of, have hope, but
Hmm.
also at the same time, it's also be prepared for the fact that it might not recover. And with the smell training, this is one of the challenges with that. Some people find it helpful, okay, but also we can't really say for sure that the smell training, we don't know that there's the smell training that's actually responsible for the recovery, or is it that we're going to experience some recovery anyway, and the training has helped them as parts has sort of helped aid that natural recovery. But it's in an ideal world, you'd be able to do the same people through
Hmm.
with smell training and
And
without smell
without, yeah.
training. But of course, it's not possible to do that. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges. And going back to my earlier point of we need more research.
And who is working on this kind of research at the moment? Who's really kind of doing a deep dive into this?
There's a big body of smell and taste scientists around the world. Lots of people in America. There's people at the Manel Center. There's
Ah,
Steve
yeah.
Munger at the University of Western Virginia, and many more. But it is still a small field in comparison to others.
Post-COVID, is it a better funded field, perhaps?
Um, I wouldn't say so as
Uh,
yet, but what I would
People
say,
have short memories.
people have short memories, and this is a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because how often do we hear about COVID now in the news?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and yet the problem is we've been left with a lot of people who have been left with long-term smell and taste dysfunction,
Oh, sure.
and what are government agencies doing for those people? Very very little, but I think it has prompted a sort of a surge in activity, and there's a lot more interest now, and there's a lot of people working really hard,
Hmm.
myself included, to sort of build on that interest and keep momentum up. We don't want to that sort of awareness to just be forgotten and dissipate.
And so what are the aims? What's in the next 3 to 5 years? What is it that Fifth Sense is? What are you working on at the moment that you feel is going to help solve that problem?
A number of things. So our sort of our big goals are we want more specialist non-taste services. We've got at the moment we've got
And what would that look like?
so specialist services run by ear, nose, and throat consultants who
Right.
have
Okay.
expertise and empathy for patients, and also are armed with all the sort of treatments available to them, and understanding of what could be done for individual patients, and smell testing to be done in all those clinics. That's a crucial thing, and that's another thing.
You're working with the NHS on some of these things now, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. We are. So we're working with the NHS in a number of ways. We're, as I mentioned before, we're delivering educational training to different groups of health and social care professionals. So the non-specialist areas, if you like. At the same time, we work with all the individual ENT consultants who are running the sort of specialist clinics. But we've also got a strategic partnership with ENT UK, so the professional body for ear, nose, and throat consultants. And what we want to do through working with them is we hopefully encourage more specialist clinics to be set up. So we want to get to a point where everyone in the UK has got access to a local specialist smell and taste service if they need one, rather than at the moment we've got this it's a bit of a postcode lottery. And then the other thing that we want to see is for the sense of smell to be tested as routinely as eyesight and hearing.
Ah,
Okay.
okay. And the
'Cause
benefit would be?
well, there's another aspect of smell loss is that it can be the sign of a more serious health condition. So Parkinson's disease, for example,
Okay.
it's now acknowledged that one of the early indicators of the onset of Parkinson's disease is a loss of the sense of smell.
Right.
So if we were testing the sense of smell routinely, okay, we could identify issues like that sooner, ensure that people were then treated sooner, okay, and save the NHS some money. And what's also interesting is, because this is one of the complicated things about this whole area, is that the charity, we're dealing with a symptom of a whole range of different health issues that cause a problem with smell and taste.
Hmm.
So it's not, it's not like we're dealing with a specific sort of disease, if you like. We're dealing with the result of all sorts of different health
Sure.
issues, and different health issues can potentially cause different types of disruption and dysfunction with the sense of smell. So in some ways, well, for some issues, identification might actually be a more important indicator than the threshold, for example.
Okay.
So coming back to this point of the need for more smell tests, different types of
Yeah.
diagnostics to be developed, there's another smell test that was developed in the US that consists of like a booklet with different smells on it. And they're all they're labeled and everything. And there is
Scratch
some,
and sniff.
yeah, it's exactly, yeah. And there are some smells in there. For example, I think there's wintergreen, which is obviously a very US specific smell. Okay,
Right.
but wouldn't mean very much to someone in the UK or indeed other countries. So what's happened is there's now been different versions of this test developed in different countries that are,
Oh,
culturally
right. Okay.
specific. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, culturally, I would say again, this is something that we've seen when doing these smell tests. Cinnamon, when you have people with more of, let's say, a UK palate, will smell it and say, smells kind of sweet. And you think, well, cinnamon isn't sweet. It's not a sweet ingredient. It's quite bitter and astringent. But we have such a strong sweet association with it because we smell it and it makes us think of kind of Christmas and pies and that's it's the context with which we're used to consuming cinnamon tends to be sweet.
Yeah.
Versus when you go to places like the Middle East, again, they do use it in sweet preparations, but they also use it a lot in savory preparations. So when you give it to people and you say, what do you smell? Is it sweet or savory? They don't really have a strong association either way with it. They don't smell cinnamon and say, oh, that smells lovely and sweet. They're just like, oh, cinnamon. And what's interesting with that then is if you kind of take that a step further, what we found is aromas that people find to be sweet. So things like caramel or butterscotch or cinnamon and these kind of aromas. If you spray them while people are drinking, a glass of wine, let's say, or a glass of
Yeah.
whiskey, that in some way that almost augments the experience to make that whiskey taste sweeter in some way and adds those kind of spicy cinnamon notes if it happens to be cinnamon that you're spraying. And there's something interesting about how the brain takes that kind of orthonasal, what we're smelling on the outside, and melds it in our brain to kind of give us that experience of added sweetness through what we're smelling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's really, really interesting. And going back to an earlier point, what it's kind of saying is that we're not actually very good I'd been able to identify aromas
Sure.
without some other kind of level of input to help us. And I think also it goes to show just how sort of subjective and influenced we can be, or our perception of smells can be
Sure.
by other factors. And again, going back to this whole thing about the sort of lack of understanding and appreciation, that sort of starts out, quite early. Think about to going to school. Did you learn much about smell or taste at school?
Not at all. No.
No,
No.
no.
Well, I think this is the thing is smell as a sense is further detracted from by the fact that when we talk about flavor, a lot of people think of it as
Oh,
just
yeah.
being taste. We ignore completely the fact that, well, there's research out there that would suggest that 80 to 90% of what you actually perceive as flavor comes from your sense of taste. Comes from your sense of smell. And having had that 1 week of loss of sense of smell, I would completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you can drink lemon juice or lime juice and you can tell that it's sour. What I wasn't able to do was tell which was lemon and which was lime.
No.
There was no nuance between the two. And I would say the same would work for things like, a strawberry or raspberry juice or anything that could be kind of slightly similar, both in terms of color and texture. And if you don't have that nuance to it, it's very difficult to be able to kind of distinguish between these.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because I can think of a conversation I had once with somebody where we were talking about this, and they said, "Yeah, but," referring to sourness, and said, "Yeah, but that's just a sensation, isn't it?" And it was, which was really, and I was like, "Well, no, but that's a taste."
Yeah.
And honestly, Joseph, if I had got a pound for every time I'd been asked the question, when I say to someone, "So I've got no sense of smell," they turn around and go, "So does that mean you can't taste then?"
Sure.
Then the charity's coffers would be
Yeah. I imagine so.
very
Yeah.
rich, I think.
I imagine so.
So, people have got some sort of understanding that they're connected, but they don't really
But
understand.
I think COVID did a lot for that as well in terms of the awareness, I mean, around that, in the sense of people now, when they talk about a loss of, well, people may still, because colloquially, I guess we use that term of, oh, I lost my sense of taste or I couldn't perceive flavor, but they know it's coming from a loss of sense of smell now.
Yes.
But I think, we're probably going to be a bit more geeky about it, or a bit more kind of, articulate about what these things mean. But I think the general public, I think, now have more of an awareness in some way that aroma and what I smell is impacting what I taste. And although that might not be technically correct, the sentiment is right.
Yes, indeed. And I think for me, what the important thing is then, but what does that mean? What does that mean for somebody? And I think the important point being that if someone is not able to experience the full range of flavors and tastes, and whether that happens quickly as a result of something, or whether that's a deterioration over time, what it can result in is people not enjoying certain foods and drinks, not enjoying the overall eating experience, people's appetite changing, people's food choice changing, and hence their diet changing, and hence their nutritional intake potentially being poorer. And this has been one of the really, really interesting things that we've been seeing over the past 12 to 18 months through the education training work we're doing, particularly working with caregiving, people working with caregiving organisations, and how the penny is starting to drop with carers and the organisations they work for, is that, an elderly person in care with dementia, for example, who has gradually sort of lost interest in food, not eating properly, has lost weight, that actually they may have sort of lost their sense of smell and are able to actually appreciate and enjoy the flavours, tastes of things, and that could be a big factor in their wider health. And so, how do we start to identify that
And build solutions
and
for
build
it.
solutions? And the identification comes back to the point about this is why we should test people's sense of smell. A lot of it can be done by simply drawing people's attention to what they're experiencing, making people aware of something that a lot of the time we're not aware of and we don't think about. And actually by, helping people attach a label to something, they can then look out for, they can identify that, and they can start to then become aware of it and focus on it. So I think there's yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a big need, okay? There are lots and lots of big gaps, but I always believe that when there's, when there are missing things, there's lots of opportunity for more research and certainly for me, research into finding practical solutions that can aid people's health.
So where can people find out more about Fifth Sense? And for those out there who are listening to this because they've been Googling or YouTubing or whatever, something about loss of sense of smell, and they happen to have come across this, what should they do?
Head over to our website, which is www.fifthsense.org.uk. Anyone who's listening to this, who's wants to find out more, who needs some support, help, information, just get in touch with our team. Drop us an email, info@fifthsense.org.uk, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Amazing. Duncan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Jozef.
Really
Absolute
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Cheers.
it's good catching up.
Likewise. Yeah, that's been really good.